So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about this, the Sigma 85mm 1.4 art lens. So this channel isn't a review channel. I don't buy kit and then review it and then return it. I don't really see the point in that. I would rather buy a bit of kit that I know I'm going to use it for an extended period of time and give you my honest opinion on it. Now, I've had this lens for 2 years. I actually bought this lens just before I was about to go and shoot a wedding in Iceland, and as you do, and I actually wanted to use this lens on that wedding. Unfortunately, it didn't come in time and I had to go and pick it up after the wedding. So I was very disappointed. However, this lens was definitely worth the wait. Just a slight disclaimer before we start, I am not endorsed or sponsored by Sigma in any way, shape or form. I do have a working relationship with them. We've been in sort of talks about doing some bits here and there. However, they do not sponsor me. I do not make any profit off Sigma. I bought this lens with my own hard-earned cash. So yeah, in case you're wondering, this is going to be a semi-unbiased review. I think the best way, if we're going to talk about image quality, is to actually show you some of the images I've taken with this lens. I've used this lens for both portraiture and street photography, and also a little bit of automotive photography I've used this lens for, and I have to say I'm blown away. Absolutely blown away with the images that come out of this lens. Previous to buying the 85mm, I had never actually owned any of like the Nikon gold ring lenses. I'd used some like Canon L series lenses just with some friends and through work. However, when I actually bought this lens, an art series lens for Sigma, I was immediately just taken aback by the quality and the rendering that comes out of this lens. So I'll just throw some images up on screen and you can see the detail that comes out of this lens. Even at 1.4, which isn't, nobody shoots a lens at 1.4 and expects everything to be sharp. Even at 1.4, this lens performs exceptionally well. I've found, especially shooting on an 85mm at 1.4, absolutely nothing really is in focus. You know that film with Will Smith and Margot Robbie called Focus? Yeah, there's none of that with this lens, absolutely nothing. However, when you stop it down and actually use it at maybe like 2.8 or even at f4, you can see how sharp and crystal clear this lens is. I took a picture recently of my brother walking through a puddle. It was for like a portfolio shoot for him, for his modeling agency. You just had to look at the amount of detail in those water droplets. They look animated. It's really hard to say. I'm gushing over this lens, but the images that I've been able to get out using this lens on a full frame body is insane. I've started to use this lens less and less for street photography, mainly because I've bought a cheap 50mm lens that I've been sort of testing out to see if I like the focal range. So if I was to jump from the 85, I would go down to a 50. Almost definitely would be the Sigma 50mm 1.4. But even for street photography, this lens, and I've actually made a whole video using this lens, you can see that it provides a really, really unique sort of depth of field and focal range and compression with the background. There are two sort of standard focal lengths within street photography. I guess you could argue there are three, so you could have 28mm, you could have 35mm, and then 50mm, and that's sort of it. That's like the standard legacy set of street photography lenses. However, with the 85mm, you get that extra bit of reach, you get that extra bit of compression, and I think that looks really, really cool and unique, and almost gives your images a bit of a cinematic feel. So as some of you might know, I also do some automotive photography. That's mainly personal projects that I make for myself, and I have used this lens. I did a video with my good friend James, and there's a behind the scenes of that I will leave in the description, where you can see me using this lens extensively on that shoot to get that sort of compressed look, that really sort of long focal length, shallow depth of field look. And I think that looks amazing. Just a quick note for like automotive photography and also street photography, I guess. The focusing speed of this lens is lightning fast. I don't understand, like I said earlier, I hadn't owned any like Nikon gold ring lenses or any sort of upmarket lenses before I invested in this 85mm, and I was astonished when I started testing this lens, started doing like the close to far away focusing tests, and it's just lightning fast. So for automotive photography and street photography, contrary to public belief, you are actually allowed to use autofocus if you're doing street photography. There seems to be this weird discussion around whether you should or not. But especially for automotive photography, this lens autofocus is next level. These are some images that I shot with my friend Matt, and we shot these around the Tobacco Docks area in London. And one thing that's really cool about this lens, and probably most lenses around this focal length, is that you can almost sort of achieve this like faux medium format look. If you look at any sort of medium format images, probably shot on film, you can see that if they're using a lens at a slightly shallow depth of field but on a medium format sensor or bit of film, there's that weird sort of separation from the background and you can really isolate your subject. And I like to sort of try and achieve that look with this lens. It's almost like medium format on a budget. It's not going to be the same as medium format. However, I think the look that you can get with this lens, especially if you're doing full body portraits at 1.4, 1.8, 2.8, is going to look really, really good. So we've talked about the optics and we've talked about the image quality. When you buy a lens like this, you expect the build quality to be really, really good. And the Sigma lens delivers on that. It's a really, really solid construction. I'm not sure if this bit's actually plastic, but it's so high quality, I assume it is. And this ring is metal, the focusing barrel is metal, and you know, look at that front optic. That's just insane. Honestly, I don't know why I'm even going to bother making things I don't like about this lens, because the things that I do like far outweigh the things that I don't like. But that does bring me on to the weight side of this lens. It's not a light lens. It's pretty massive. And that's one of the reasons that this lens is actually quite affordable, and one of the reasons that a lot of Sigma lenses are affordable. If you look at the Nikon 85mm or the Canon 85mm 1.4, you'll know that they're actually pretty stocky lenses. And that's because Nikon and Canon invest a lot of time and effort and money into developing lenses that can be as small as possible, but also perform optically well, have a shallow depth of field, have a correct focal length. And Sigma, to make their lenses more affordable, they don't sort of step over that. Obviously they try to keep it as small as possible, but they don't invest as much time and effort and money into it. And that's a good thing, because that makes these lenses cheaper. Optically, I probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So if you're willing to trade size and weight and comfort for optical superiority, I would say that this lens should be in your wish list. So in terms of comfort with this lens and how it feels when you're shooting with it, I've got quite big hands, and if I'm using this on a DSLR, it's actually very, very comfortable. It is very front heavy because I guess all of the bigger glass elements are in this front sort of 2/3. However, when you're holding it on a big grip and you've got your hand under here, it's actually very, very comfortable. That being said, if you're holding this for an extended period of time, you're probably going to start feeling a little bit of discomfort. I recently did a shoot where I was holding this lens on a camera for about 9 hours-ish, and I was ruined by the end of it. My back was so sore. I guess that's my own fault for not like having a proper strap or not using a bag or whatever. However, this lens is heavy. It is heavy. So if you're a landscape photographer, you might not want to be looking at a lens that weighs the best part of, I think it's like 1 kilogram at least. So as I mentioned earlier, I actually bought this little cheap 50mm 1.8. I put a little nifty 50 sticker on there. And as you can see, these lenses are, you know, it's night and day. It's actually kind of silly now that I put them next to each other. Optically, this lens is nowhere near this lens. Focusing speed, this thing is all over the shop. However, I really enjoyed using this lens for street photography, and I've probably enjoyed using this lens more than the 85mm for street photography. The reason being, like I said, the size difference and the weight difference. So I guess like with all things in your day-to-day life, you've got to weigh up the pros and cons of what you want to invest your time and money into, and whether or not there are certain things you are willing to trade off for optics and focusing speed. Personally, I would say that the Sigma 85mm 1.4 art lens is a very wise choice for anybody going into portraits, street photography, especially automotive photography if you want to do racetrack photography, etc, etc. If you want to have really, really high quality images, then this is your guy. So that is my long-term review of the 85mm 1.4 art lens from the fine folk over at Sigma. There are hundreds of reviews of every single lens that was ever made out there on YouTube, And I generally feel like a lot of them are just the kind of people who sit down and review lenses and cameras for a living. And personally, I feel like those people, if they want to have an opinion on a camera or a lens, they should spend less time talking about it and more time going out there and using it. And I don't mean for the day. I don't see how you can have form an opinion on something that you've used for a day. Hence why I wanted to do this review after nearly 2 years of owning this lens. I feel like I've been able to give you the ups and downs of this lens and also some insight into how I would use this lens and the images that I've produced with this lens. Like I said earlier, there are a couple of videos on my YouTube channel which sort of show me using the 85mm lens extensively, the main one being the Audi behind the scenes video and also this street photography at 85mm video. So apart from that, thank you very much for watching this video. Big shout out to Sigma for making good quality gear at an affordable price. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day and I shall see you in the next video.